It is 4:30 Sunday morning. Captain Tom Tye and Locke Reedy, having been swept off the Almazan, are in the water and taking a pounding.
Every wave that avalanches on them buries them, so that they're actually underwater for a while. Then they've got to fight their way to the top. Then they've only got seconds now to reposition themselves so that the next oncoming wave doesn't hit them in the face.
It was just a wall of water. And sometimes you'd ride up on it, the wave would break down on top of you. You'd fall off the wave, slide down the face of the wave. It was horrific.
Chances of survival and rescue are slim, but responding to the Mayday and emergency radio signal, the Coast Guard is already mounting a rescue effort. It would become their search and rescue case of the year.
They were beyond helicopter range, and so it was a complex system of working with a Navy aircraft carrier, getting that at the halfway point so that the Coast Guard helo could go and do what they call a lily pad landing, land on the aircraft carrier, refuel, and then go up.
As dawn approaches, Locke hopes the light of day will bring increased chance of rescue, but the relentless thrashing of the waves is taking a toll. Tom Tye, 65 years old and a lifelong sailor, is fading.
He wasn't speaking as clearly or nearly as much, and he started then to gasp. He tried to take off his life vest and give it to me, and I knew then that he knew that his time was close. He was having a difficult time, and I started to give him mouth to mouth, and it was at that point too late, and he just faced over.
In that moment, that horrible moment, Locke makes a pledge to bring Tom's body home.
And I really believe that might be what saved Locke, because the odds were overwhelming. A lot of people would begin to call it quits, especially if your best friend has just died in your arms. It'd be easy to go quick. But he makes this vow, and so that gives him something to fight for.
On board the battered Almazan, a separate drama for Chris, Ron, and Kathy.
They're doing everything in their power to keep that sailboat afloat. They're bailing with buckets, but they're realizing just as much water's coming in through the broken windows.
Drawn by the emergency radio beacon, a naval ship and a tanker, the Sakura Express, have come to the Almazan's aid, but both nearly crush her as they approach in the heaving seas.
That was probably the scariest part, was the attempted rescues by the Sakura Express. Because we didn't have an engine, we had to come up alongside of them, and keep in mind there are 40-foot seas. We pull up next to it, and our small but much smaller boat is rocketing up and down on the waves, and at one point we're looking at the waterline, and then at the next point we're looking at deck level, up and down, and we're banging against them. And I just remember thinking, this boat cannot take much more of it. And sure enough, we had to cast off the line that they gave us because the boat was just being torn apart by them.
Such is the drama on this Chris Farrer's very first offshore sail. It is now apparent the only rescue will be from a Coast Guard helicopter, and even that will be difficult.
They've only got 20 minutes to rescue all three before their fuel situation is critical, that they won't be able to make it back to land. The tension is unbelievable in the aircraft.
Tension that is about to get even worse.
And Chris Farrer says the low point on the Almazan came when they heard over the radio that an oil tanker that was nearby had found the life raft from the boat, but that it was empty. At that point, they said they had very little hope that Tom and Locke would survive. Rescuers do arrive near Locke, but will they see him in the dark?
I was afraid they were leaving. They had given up.
His desperate attempts to get attention when Chronicle continues.
It was a reassuring sight, a Coast Guard helicopter hovering over the crippled Almazan. But this was not going to be a simple rescue.
It is Chris Farrer's first time sailing offshore, and he finds himself bobbing in the crippled yacht Almazan, waiting for rescue when a Coast Guard helicopter comes into view.
It was so windy, they could not lower the harness to us while we were on the boat. We had to jump in the water. So they put the Coast Guard swimmer in, and then Kathy went first, and she went in the water, and they tried to bring her up in a basket. And they brought her up in the basket, and it took an extraordinarily long time, and it turns out that the cable jammed in the sliding door.
So you can imagine the co-pilot giving the readings, 15 minutes, 14 minutes, and the pilot going, everything okay back there? Tell us what's happening. And the hoist operator goes, the cable's stuck. It's back by the back rotor. It's stuck behind the external fuel tank. So the tension is unbelievable in the aircraft, and that hoist operator is trying everything. And finally, he just grabs the door with all his might, and the door's on sliders, and he is able to budge it, and that frees the cable.
Chris and then Ron are quickly raised into the helicopter.
But the pilots know it ain't over. We're on fumes. As they approached Nantucket, they saw a color on the fuel gauge. They said, we'd never seen a bright orange before. That means you're near the end. And they knew that in this storm, they just had one chance to get it down and get it down quick.
On fumes, the helicopter makes Nantucket. Kathy, Ron, and Chris are safe. But far away, still in the water as night descends again, Locke is struggling to hold on.
When things go bad, it's too easy to let them take over and just put you down and crush you. I just could not allow myself to think that I wasn't going to live to see all those things that I wanted to see and do. And once you give up, you're done. And I couldn't do that.
But Locke is beginning to suffer from hypothermia, seeing vivid hallucinations and struggling to hold his fading strobe light above his head.
A plane came down over the top of us, but I thought it was a hallucination.
But it wasn't. Incredibly, a Coast Guard search plane catches the faintest glimpse of Locke's weakening light. The tanker Sakura Express now rushes toward the location, but when they arrive, it is dark, and they cannot spot Locke Reedy.
I kept yelling and yelling and yelling, and nothing happened. I talked to the ocean at that point. I said to the ocean, I said, leave us alone. Just please leave us alone. They're here. Can't you see they're here to help us? All of the lights had been turned off on the ship. And I was afraid they were leaving. They had given up. So I started pushing Tom ahead of me and just yelled as loud as I could, Captain, Captain, I'm here. Don't go, don't leave. Then all hell broke loose. They apparently saw me and came down on the deck.
It's nothing short of a miracle that he makes it, because you've got nighttime, you've got a weakening strobe, you're being buried by the waves for 24 hours. I don't know how you physically can do that.
On board the tanker, Tom's body also recovered. Locke gets the word he hoped for.
Captain told me that at that point, the other 3 members of the crew had been rescued. That was one of my major concerns, and the captain told me that they survived, they were alive, and it just lifted a huge weight.
Looking back, Locke says positive thoughts of his family, and his promise to Tom sustained him.
All of this in the past 5 years is really extra for me. I by all rights should not be here.